Alessia Falsarone, welcome to Let's Talk Money. It's fantastic to have you here. Now, Alessia, we've known each other for a few years, all on
Correct.
Zoom, but it's been great. And since you first won that award a few years ago, you've been a fantastic judge and you've really supported She Inspires. I'm so grateful for it. And I've got to know you quite a lot since then, but I'm sure there's things I don't know about you. So, first of all, could you perhaps start by introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do?
First of all, Ray, thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to see how the She Inspire Foundation has grown throughout the years. I'm extremely impressed by all the impact that it's having in the local community, but also internationally, as you have reached out. And on the international front, in fact, I don't live in the UK. I have family and friends, and I do business in the UK. But I'm currently based, as I've been for the last almost 20 years in the United States. And so I'm calling you today from New York, where I live. And my background is pretty much of financial services professional all along. I started very much my journey in Europe very early on in a trainee program. And this trainee program in a bank led me to countries I would have never expected, from, again, North America to Canada and the US to Asia to Latin America and the likes. And so this has been a very much discovery of, in a way, how people and communities relate to not only their finances, but their life, their independent decision making. And obviously, capital allocation and investments are an important part of community development, countries' development, and our standing in the world.
Okay, thank you. As you know, the theme for Let's Talk Money is very much financial numeracy for women and girls. And I'd just like to go back a little bit into your childhood. Yeah, you grew up in Italy?
Correct. That's correct, Ray.
Okay. Did you have a particular interest in finance, in numeracy at that age? Tell us a little bit about your attitude to that.
Yes, actually, it's interesting you asked that, because I grew up in the middle of Italy, actually, the actual geographical center of the country. It's also a very rural area, or it was at the time. And at the time, there were also the very beginning of a labor force that was going into manufacturing, and the first manufacturing plants being set up. And I grew in a household very much that was in between that transition as well. So my grandparents were farmers or farmland workers that had gained, little by little, their status, independence, and their own land. Very proudly, raised their daughters. And, my mom decided that, from a teaching job, she would actually go into the private sector and industry. And so that actually helped me see the opportunity of women going, from the household and working in a community environment, all the way seeking more, in a way, financial independence.
Right.
And my dad was a government worker, very devoted government worker, but you can understand how that completely changed the dynamics in my household. And interesting enough, I think the first fascination about how commerce works in general is what led me to think about investing and money, and studying then economics in college later on. And I remember studying, in Italy, we studied growing up a lot about, obviously, the Roman Empire, but even more so how trade and commerce is set up from cities, if you think about the city of Venice and Marco Polo and all of that, right? And so the entire history of the development of Italy and the Mediterranean bases and the likes was extremely appealing to me. So I remember reading all the stories about going in Far East lands and reading about, the exchange. What would you exchange? And this idea that you didn't have coins before, you had something else to measure. For me, this was incredible, establishing the value. And one city may be very good at, sort of quilting, and another one instead was incredibly good at carving wood. And so they would find a connection or a mean of exchanging that value. For me, that was incredibly fascinating. Then when I finally got to college, was almost a one-way street for me, right? I think my parents probably would have wanted me to have a different career. I think my dad always secretly wanted me to be a doctor. Needless to say, yes, yeah. They would have loved a doctor at home. For me, that early fascination with how the world is connected through commerce, what that means, how that develops a community and speaks about our heritage, got me into the study of economics. So that's the gist of it. But you're absolutely right. You touched on an important point. Early on in life, we are shaped, right? Starting from our households, or what we see out of our window, we're shaped in the decisions of what we may want to pursue later on.
Yeah. Well, I got a degree in economics, but I certainly didn't have a a kind of enthusiasm for it when I was at school. That sounds incredible. Were you unusual because at such a young age to have all these thoughts and feelings? And it sounds like it was deep inside you.
Yes. And I
Excuse me.
think it was, again, the historical context was very important for me. I also come from a family, I would say, where grandmothers, and so these female figures in the household that have to go through, they have to adjust to changing economic environment or changing family conditions, and be entrepreneurial in the way they adapt their families, was something that attracted me also into looking into the commerce part of what it means to grow a community or grow your market. In particular, my dad's mom was very much so an entrepreneur. She raised 9 kids, and almost entirely, by herself, because after the death of my granddad, and she was very much an entrepreneur. Prior to the words, after the words, how she would reposition her business from, bread making into utilizing the ovens where you cook, bread, into, helping with production of bricks, right, to secure small towns when, the wars emerged, right, both wars. So that's, I don't know if I would have had that thought, but what was important at the time, and how you can make sure you stay afloat, and that was an essential part of that. So I remember also growing up hearing her stories about it, right? Things that we would call today very fancy, pivoting your business value or your business case, right? And at the time that she was just doing that as a natural way of building resilience, right, in the face of emergency or very adverse situations.
Of course. So at school and within your peer group, were they influenced also by their family situation, or was there something going on in school which all led you to actually focus on these areas which may not be the key topics in other schools? What happened to you? Was it just a natural instinct for you as an individual?
It's interesting. So my school my school journey throughout was very much a public school, a sort of product, and I was very fortunate to be in districts that were not necessarily homogeneous, right, for the standards of the Italian population. As you know, Italy has always had, in the past as well, the influence of migration. We are really at the intersection of the Mediterranean basin. And so if anything, was not as much yet this idea that there would be new kids and new families coming in the community and they would join our community, and so the school system, and so fascination about where they were coming from, right? What are you bringing with you? So learning different cultures and traditions, which I always found fascinating and enriching. But at the time was mostly the movement, because a lot of families were in the area for a couple of years and then they will move again. And so I would obviously also see, in a way, the negative influence, right, of continuing to move to find more opportunity, or because your job moves and therefore the family, in a way, moves along. And so while you would have an influx of new kids, in town, which was great. On the other hand, you will also see how many of these kids will struggle, right, to adjust, simply because they wouldn't spend the entire maybe cycle, right, of the school year, or they wouldn't come, at a later cycle. And so they wouldn't be able to, in a way, either get used to the new school system that we're joining, but also contribute, right? I think the teaching staff or the teaching body was not yet ready, right? What do you do in this type of situations? So I've seen the downside of that in a way, right? Commerce that also leads though to economic situations that force a family to move, and therefore children to miss out on the educational opportunity they may have.
Okay. I know there's a correlation between mathematics and music, and you sound like one of those children that if it had been music, you would have been playing, you'd been like a concert pianist at the age of 9 or something like that. So am I right about that? Do you have this within you, which isn't necessarily within all your peer group at school and college? Is something different about you?
I just found myself, I honestly never consider myself whether different or never try to relate what I enjoy versus what other people enjoy. I just continue to focus on finding opportunities and meeting people and building friends and community around things I'm really passionate about. And so I have a young daughter that is in the public school system now in the United States, and I see that there's a tremendous ask for almost choosing early what your passion is, right, or what your
Yes.
after school. There's a menu. But for me, I didn't have any after school program. Your after school was, your garden, if you were lucky to have one, right? Or bicycling or things like that, and studying. And so books for me led me to other places. My history book was leading me to another place. My geography book was leading me to cross, the country, go straight to the Alps and figured out what was happening after, right? So I actually think the studies allowed me to, in a way, feed my curiosity with more. But also when you're talking about music, I wanted to share that at least at the time growing up, that was a very expensive proposition, right? So unless you had a music teacher that was really devoted to bring you on the path of music, you wanted to, I built the foundations at school, but I really didn't have the financial resources in addition to, the daily needs to go and actually pursue, a career in music, or even just grow that more. And so what happened is I devoted myself to the school choir, and then from that, actually, that became very has followed me throughout, my adult life as well. Usually, my part of my volunteering activities have always involved music, whether bringing musical programs to K-12, institutes that they don't have, or joining, a choir. And so that I think is part of the whole process. And as you are helping me go back in time, I think it's all it's a blessing, right, in life.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I recall once when I was running a very large company in the UK. That I got together all the senior directors who were in charge of substantial amounts of business, so many millions of pounds each, and we had an overnight session, then a whole day with a financial expert, someone who probably wasn't as smart as you, but cost a fortune, by the way. And these people were obviously very successful in what they did, but their understanding of finance was just so low. And in fact, one of the things I found out during that day, and they found out, was they knew even less than I thought and that they thought. And it's just one of those weird things that financial numeracy at school, at university, at work is actually so low. It certainly is in this country. And the difference it would make if people had this information would be just tremendous. And as you know, one of the things we're doing, Let's Talk Money, is talking about coercive financial control and the need for the survivors of that kind of abuse to have more financial numeracy, to understand what it is they're going through. And we've had some very touching stories from people at times when the abuse they were suffering hadn't been given a name. Nobody called it coercive control. They just knew it was wrong. And it's really important, we thought anyway, that there should be better financial numeracy taught in schools, and certainly to girls for the reasons that I've just covered. Do you think life is changing and we should be paying more attention to financial numeracy in schools so everyone, boys and girls, get to understand what life is like, how to be a person in terms of understanding taxation, rates, pensions, things like that, how they can live their life? Because unless you understand and control money, you can't get anywhere. No one's going, well, very few people are going to get to the level that you're at, but you must have an instinct for how important this is for everyone.
I think it's hugely important, Ray, not just in schools. I'm a strong believer that it starts from our homes, whether it's a single parent home, it's a traditional family home, or any other shape or form our families and our living conditions at home are. The idea that, I think the first act of abuse is not knowing. That means denying the opportunity to participate, not just in decision making, but to understand the safety aspect of the economic background that a family or a household faces. I think that's important because I always consider financial literacy as the bedrock of freedom. And that goes into all communities around the globe. I think there's plenty of economics research support for that, and we see in the least developed countries, right, how that goes. That coercive behavior that you see in a household, it can become, a state of threat and at the government level, right, to citizens every day. Let alone women and the most vulnerable, obviously, in society, which are not necessarily only women, children, and the elderly as well, disabled and the like all individuals that don't necessarily have, the access to or the ability to have access to prompt information. And that's also what inclusion is about, right? And creating that type of environment in schools is priority, where families at the moment are struggling and households are struggling to make all ends meet in terms of recognizing what values, how strong their values are, how much they like to see in the community that they have of representation, how much they feel hopeful or hopeless surrounding that. So I think in a way, financial literacy and the ability to actually stay on a budget, stay on a plan, builds security about decision making and gives back the choice to the person, whoever it is, right? And for female workers or for women in general that either are in the workforce or aspire to be in the workforce. This is essential since the very beginning of their studies, right? When we're talking about elementary schools and so forth. So I absolutely am convinced that schools can play a pivotal role in that.
You know, you've said some amazing things. Financial literacy is the bedrock of freedom. You know, we're going to pinch that and pretend that we came up with it.
It's okay. That's perfect. As long as I contribute. It's my, but again, when and it was brilliant of you of asking me at the beginning, where I come from was shaped, right? My early choices. And again, having a female, protagonist of my life, right, in a daily basis, whether a grandmother or a mother that have need, whether it is by emergency because they have their spouse passing away, or whether because there are economic emergencies or any better opportunities for women to emerge in society in terms of able to build their presence in the world around them. It's extremely important, right? I've seen women claiming their seat at the table, not just preparing the table and assembling what goes on that, right?
Well, given that financial literacy, you and I agree, is the bedrock of freedom, do we not owe a duty of care to those who are brought up without the opportunity to become financially literate, especially those that get caught in these traps of coercive control? Should we not be doing more for them? And when they are trapped, should we not treat them better, because we don't seem to be?
What I first of all, I agree with that. Second of all, I think the dialogue I am seeing emerging in public policy making as a result, not necessarily of this kind of discussion we're having on financial literacy, but getting to financial literacy from a place of migration, right? Of people moving from place to place. And so bringing their own values, their own idea of independence with them and what that means for them, has created, for example, in Europe, something called horizontal policies, right? So not just vertical, right? Government laws and here's you abide to the law, but also how do we make sure that this stratified, population actually doesn't get stratified even more so, because we have this vertical view of from top down of what government policy should be. But how do we reach, within each situation, so that the result of policy are really social policies to help at least articulate what are the issues at each level of the economy and for each citizen or for each person living there, regardless of their status, right, in that particular country or jurisdiction. I think we will see a lot more there probably going in terms of the need for financial literacy to be part of, for example, skills building, right, for work, or retraining for the digital economy and the likes, right? Training for the digital economy, if left to the individual, can be as easy as going on Google and getting, thanks to Google, their free access to their tools, or Microsoft or the likes, you call the Magnificent Seven, each one of them has free, but, also requires other skills that may not everybody has, or access also to more advanced infrastructure, in a way I would call it at home, and sometimes there is this need also to upgrade all our outreach, from business to individual, and individual in their own place. And I remember during COVID, you probably you remember when schools were basically giving laptops to children, right? But that didn't come first. So when they were planning all over the globe, it was not about, we move digital, but not everybody has access to digital, right? This idea was, let's move digital, but you may not have it, not have the ability. So as a second step, there was, well, but we are not reaching out everyone, right? And that everyone missing is the piece to basically bring to the table when it comes to financial literacy. We want nobody missing at the table of financial literacy.
Then you've got the problem there that you're talking about mobile phones, you're talking about um, iPads, laptops. Sometimes in schools, these are banned in terms of them being personal devices, but yet we don't have enough of them. They're not integrated enough into the curriculum and the way education is approached. So we have this complete mismatch between what should be happening. And it bothers me a lot that sometimes the digital technologies are frowned upon in terms of they're a negative. And we've got to, and sometimes they are, and I understand why those thoughts are there. So it is a problem. Do you, because you obviously know a lot about different communities around the world, are some people doing it better than others?
The answer is, I think the people that are doing better than others are the ones that see the need. And it may be of interest for me to relate that in the last 2 years, I transitioned from a front end investment role where I was leading, a large, platform for investment from pension funds and the like, so big investors into also a research-led environment. And so I share my own expertise in focusing on sustainable investing, so investing that brings about also the ability for us to preserve our natural resources, but also grow in our social awareness and understanding of the people that need to benefit from our social economic development that we all seek to achieve. And in that context, I joined forces with a university here in the United States. We launched a program, and that program was about the circular economy, and now obviously communities that rely on optimizing their access to natural resources. They're also the ones that need to be the most aware of issues surrounding biodiversity or protection of environmental land at risk and the like. And it's interesting, I've seen in communities that are the most dependent on natural resources, for example, in the Caribbean, and one of these was in Costa Rica. There is a huge divide in socioeconomic statistics in Costa Rica, and same for educational statistics. Yet these were the places, the local markets, where regionally the population was more willing to cooperate and focus on developing their own set of building skills, building knowledge, to make sure that the products that are produced in a certain area still respect the land that they obviously are on, and continue to provide for a community to grow and blossom and flourish. So, and I'm bringing an example from, tiny coastal areas in a place that, in one of the regions that obviously sees climate change and climate change mitigation being left, as a question mark, right, to their lives and to their safety and to their ability to see the lives of their kids continue in prosperous ways as opposed to in degrading ways over the years. So I wish I could give you an answer that yes, the people that are doing better are the people that have the best schools already and they have the best funding and they are the leaders in the world. Instead, I see the people that have the most need, that go back to their creativity, their collaboration, their thoughtfulness, and they're not afraid of work and collaborating and bringing financial independence to communities requires a lot of work from a lot of stakeholders. It's not just the banks or the financial experts. It's an idea of how it affects your life every day.
Okay. Look, I'm going to pay you a bit of a compliment here. I think you're a very special person, which is why you won one of our awards a few years ago, and everything you've done since. And you're just incredibly nice as well, which is fantastic. And that doesn't always come with success, I have to say, certainly in the spheres in which you travel. An honest answer, is it possible for a young girl now in school, let's say in a decent education system, to aspire to achieve what you have achieved? Or is it some of the background that you spoke about earlier on in terms of your family and your own personal instincts, really, to look and discover and always want to know more and more? And that was just you. Is it possible for a young teenage girl with decent financial literacy in a school to become someone like you?
So I think first of all, thank you for all the most thoughtful comments you made. And I also think that the She's Inspires Foundation is a magnet for people that do good work, and they are good people. And not only they mean well, but they work very hard to lift up everyone else around them that also is there with their level of integrity first and foremost ahead of them, right? So I won't lie by saying I have a young woman, as I said, at home, or a woman to be, and I need to stay hopeful and full of
Optimism.
not just optimism, but also the idea that the world will find its own way, and may be really difficult, but we will come around, and we'll see the light of day after so much in the world. Nevertheless, I also think that um, I would encourage young women and young men also to find that level of that rebel within them and utilize it as a force of good. Because in a way, I was also a rebel, right? Like, as I said, my dad would have loved that I stayed local and build a small medical practice, and he could
Right.
be helping him probably selfishly, later in life. But he would have been really excited about that. It takes courage to say no, this is not for me. Maybe I come back to that, but if the first steps I make or any other step I make in life, they're not the ultimate step that will drive who I am or where I'm going to end up. If anything, I can explore. And so I would always encourage, the young generation to think that they can always explore, and that they are the ones who are responsible for the safety, especially their mental well-being. And so to carry themselves gently out of anything that restrict themselves from feeling safe and from living in a safe environment. And I think that mental resilience, right, building
Okay.
in anything we do is utterly important.
Okay. Well, it's been absolutely amazing speaking to you. So, young rebel, Alessia
Yeah,
Falsarone, thank you so much for speaking to us today.
thank you very much. Thank you, Ray.